Hey guys, it's Tori, and today I'm going to be doing the mid-year freakout tag as well as a quick check-in for my goals for the year. Like many other people, I really love doing this every year just to kind of show off what I've read so far, really reflect on what I've read so far, and plan for the rest of the year. So let's just get right into the questions. So the first question is, what is the best book you've read so far this year? And that has to be David Copperfield by Charles Dickens. I absolutely adored this book so much. It took me several months to get through just because I kept taking breaks and things, but it ended up being so good. And I've mentioned this before, but I do really appreciate that this is the first Dickens novel that I've ever really loved. I haven't read that many. I've read Oliver Twist and I read Great Expectations before this, and Oliver Twist was fine. I was okay with it. Great Expectations I liked a lot more, but it wasn't quite a 5 stars for me. But this one definitely was a 5-star. I absolutely adored it. There were so many wonderful characters. The charm of Dickens' writing style really comes through in this book, and it's just a really wonderful story. I absolutely adore it. So definitely a favorite for the year. Definitely my favorite of the year so far. Question 2 is, what is the best sequel you've read this year? And I have not read very many sequels. I think I've only read maybe just this one. Well, okay, I read this whole series, so I read multiple sequels in this series, but this was my favorite of those. And then I don't think there's been any others. There might have been one other that I'm just not remembering right now. But I just don't read as many series as I used to, mostly because I just don't like committing to series very much anymore. I prefer to just read standalones that I can finish and just move on from. So anyway, the book I did choose for this is still one that I really loved, so it's not necessarily just a throwaway answer or anything, but that is Bring Up the Bodies by Hilary Mantel. Like I said, I did really enjoy this. I think it's actually going to be on my favorites of the year, so at least this question is still showcasing a book that I did really enjoy. But this is the second book in the Wolf Hall trilogy, the Thomas Cromwell trilogy by Hilary Mantel, and it primarily focuses on Anne Boleyn, which, if you know the history of that, you can probably guess what this contains and why it would be so interesting. It's also the shortest of all the books, which I think helps with the pacing a lot, and it's just fascinating to see the downfall of Anne Boleyn from the perspective of Thomas Cromwell, who is so instrumental in causing that to happen. And I definitely found this one easier to read compared to the first one, so that also helped it a lot. So anyway, definitely a great sequel and my favorite of the year, even though I haven't read that many. Question 3 is a new release you want to read. So I have 2 that I'm going to mention. The first one is Learwife by JR Thorp. Now, I did actually start this a little bit ago, but I ended up DNFing it. It has a similar stream of consciousness and non-linear style to the writing that the Wolf Hall trilogy has. And while I did enjoy that trilogy, it made it hard to really focus a lot of the time. It was hard to really get engaged with the story, and it made reading it a lot of work. So that being said, picking this up right after finishing that series was probably not the best idea. Because I paid full price for this, and because I'm aware that there may be a reading context going on that is not allowing me to enjoy this as much as I otherwise would, I'm going to be keeping it, and I will try again in maybe a few months or something just to see how it goes, and then if I still am struggling with it, I can get rid of it. But I do want to give it its best chance. I do think it's possible that it's just not for me, and that's okay. We'll get there when we get there. But for now, it is a temporary DNF. The other one that I have not started, read anything of, is Booth by, I think it's Karen J. Fowler. Here's a picture either way. My copy of this is currently at my parents' house, so I wasn't able to show it on here. But anyway, this is a book following the family of John Wilkes Booth, who was the man who assassinated Abraham Lincoln. I've heard that it focuses more on his family as opposed to him, which I find very fascinating. And I've heard great things about it, primarily from Jennifer Brooks, so thank you, Jennifer, for the recommendation. But yes, I really hope to be able to get to this, hopefully before the end of the year, but we'll see. Question 4 is on the opposite end of the spectrum and is asking for an anticipated release that I will be reading when it comes out. And the only thing I could think of right away for this that I know I'm going to try to get my hands on as soon as possible is, I think it's called The Winners. It's Beartown 3 by Fredrik Backman. And I believe this is the last one in this trilogy following this small hockey town that has a lot of small town drama and issues going on. The first one definitely has some very intense things going on in the town, politics and things. The second one continues to build on that. And the third one, I'm very curious to see what ends up happening in the third book, but I definitely will be wanting to read that. So that's the only one I know for sure I want to read that's coming out. Question 5 is the biggest disappointment, and for this I'm going to go with Indiana by George Sand. This is a French classic, and I was really upset by the ending of this book. I absolutely hated it. And I was really upset because this was one of the only, if not the only, female 19th century French author that I had ever read, and so I was really hoping to love it and really enjoy the French aspects of it. But alas, it went in a direction I did not like at all. I don't even know if I'm going to keep this copy. Right now I am, just because I may be willing to revisit in the future, but what I didn't like about it, I don't think I'll grow out of. I think I will always dislike that type of plot twist, or those types of plot twists that go on in this book that I really hated. So again, keeping it spoiler free, it not only disappointed me, it actively made me angry the way things went. So anyway, definitely this will be my disappointment for the year so far. And question 6 is the biggest surprise so far, and I'm going to go with Vanity Fair by William Thackeray. I had heard of several people who had DNF'd this, so going into this I knew that there was a chance maybe it wouldn't work for me, but it surprisingly did. I actually really enjoyed it, and even though I think Gone with the Wind, which I read alongside this because they are very similar to each other, Gone with the Wind is definitely a better written story, and I think originally I said that I preferred that over this, and I think objectively it is a better book. I think the writing style is much better, the character development is much better. I think there's much more effective development of the plot and the characters to allow for a grander story, but I think Vanity Fair has characters that I just have stuck with me more than the characters in Gone with the Wind. Even though in a lot of ways they're made to be very extreme, stereotypical, caricatured versions of these characters, I feel like there's also a lot of charm in that type of storytelling. And the further I get from this read-along that I hosted of both of them, the more I think of this more than I think of Gone with the Wind, and I have more tender feelings towards this than I do with Gone with the Wind. That could of course be because by the time I got to Gone with the Wind, I had spent 2 months reading this, and so I might have just been wanting to finish these two up, but I think this one just appealed to what I like in stories a little bit better than Gone with the Wind did. That being said, Gone with the Wind was still amazing, but I think this one might have just beat it out for me the further I get from them. I'd have to still ponder on that a little bit more, because I did really enjoy them both. I don't think I have anything against either of them. I just think this one, yeah, when I think of this one compared with Gone with the Wind, I just have that slightly more fond feeling for it. So anyway, it definitely surprised me because I really wasn't sure if I'd even finish it. So definitely very happy I read that this year. Question 7 is fave new author, and for this one I haven't read very many multiple books by the same author this year, or read very many authors that were just on the edge. I think I have a couple authors that are just on the edge of becoming favorites. For example, George Eliot. I think Charles Dickens has a lot of hope. I think Anthony Trollope has a lot of hope, but they're not quite to that point yet for me. They're very close. I think I just need one more book by each of them to just love, and then I'll probably add them to my list. I'm actually going to choose 2 authors because I had one written down, but as I was speaking just now, I realized there is another author that I think fits this prompt a little bit better. So the one I was going to say was just Jane Austen, because even though I've read all of her works before, my rereads of them this year have really just solidified my enjoyment of Jane Austen, my appreciation for her. I don't think I'll ever be as big of a fan as a lot of people on BookTube are of Jane Austen, but I'm very charmed by her works. I will forever be rereading them. I really like a lot of what she does in her stories. But like I said, as I was speaking, I realized there's another author that I feel like I can officially say is on my list of favorites at this point, and that's Elizabeth Gaskell. I read Cranford earlier this year, which I'll actually mention for another prompt in a little bit, but that was my 4th by Elizabeth Gaskell, and I mean, kind of before that I had started to consider her a favorite, but I think now I'm going to officially say she is a favorite author. Even though Cranford wasn't a 5-star for me, it was still very enjoyable, and really every book that I've read by her, I've at least given 4 stars. I've at least been charmed enough to give it an above average rating. So I think I'm going to officially say her, but also give that honorable mention to Jane Austen because she's finally won me over a little bit more than she has in the past, which is very exciting. Question 8 is new fictional crush, and I actually don't really have one. I mean, maybe the closest I could go is Dobbin from Vanity Fair, but even him, like, he annoyed me at certain points. It's very possible that I could be forgetting someone that appealed to me, but I mean, if they're a new fictional crush, I shouldn't be able to forget them. So I'm going to say no one for this question for this year. Prompt 9 is a new favorite character, and I would say Betsy Trotwood from David Copperfield, but I don't want to double up on books. So I'm going to go with Melanie from Gone with the Wind. I really liked her arc a lot in this story. She was such a strong, dynamic, deep character, and I absolutely loved her. I actually started off feeling like she was really boring in a lot of ways, and that she was a very flat character that wasn't very well developed, but as I continued throughout this almost 1,000-page tome, she did things and said things that just really appealed to me, and I just found myself falling in love with her by the end of the story. And yeah, she was just a wonderful, good person who definitely has her flaws, but she really cares about people. And I love the way she's willing to give people the benefit of the doubt and just do the right thing, even if it's not the popular thing. And I really appreciated her character while reading this. Question 10 is a book that made you cry, and I'm going to go with My Dark Vanessa. This is a story about a teacher abusing one of his students, so of course it's going to be upsetting, but it actually did make me cry a couple of times just seeing how horrible this abuse was. It's very, very vividly drawn, and I absolutely adored it, even though it was really hard to read, and it will probably be a long time before I reread this, but it was amazing and it did make me cry. So question 11 is a book that made me happy, and of course books in general make me happy, but the book I'm going for this is Cranford by Elizabeth Gaskell. Like I mentioned earlier, I was going to mention this sometime in the video. This one just made me smile, laugh out loud even a couple times. It was just very sweet and humorous and just charming. I really enjoyed this wonderful story about a group of ladies in the small town, older women who are just friends and just get up to all sorts of shenanigans, and it was just a very different story, but definitely a very charming story that just had me smiling the whole way through. Next is most beautiful book you've purchased, and that would have to be my illustrated edition of the Canterbury Tales. It just has these gorgeous illustrations all throughout it that I just absolutely love. And I mean, the cover itself is gorgeous. This is exactly what the dust jacket looks like as well. I don't have the dust jacket on. My only complaint is there is no like nice end pages. That's what I would have liked. Another little detail that I didn't notice until partway through reading is that at the top of each page, I don't know if you can see that super well, but at the top of each page right here, they have a figure that looks like the person telling the tale. So this is the monk's tale. Again, I don't know if you can see it very well, but it's a little monk up there, and it changes with each storyteller. So I really love that little detail. And the last question is a book you need to read before the end of the year. So I didn't do very specific goals this year, which we'll go over in a second. My only specific goal, and it was actually not quite a year goal, it was so between last Victober and this next Victober, I wanted to read 5 different Victorian novels, and 2 of them were very specific, and then the rest were just based on author. And I have yet to read one of those specific ones. So one of them was Vanity Fair, which I obviously have read, and the other one was The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. I do have plans to read this in August though, so I should be reading it very soon. So yes, that is the only one I could think of specifically that I needed to read, definitely before the end of the year, but especially before October specifically. Other than that, I do still want to keep up on my goals for the year. So if you don't know, or if you forgot, my goals for the year were surrounding 6 different types of books. I believe it was 6. Yes, 6 different types of books, and to read at least one in each of those groups in each quarter. So I've been keeping track and I've done really well so far. So I'll just read through the list of my first and second quarters, what I've done that applied to each of those prompts. So first of all, I wanted to read at least one Victorian novel in each quarter. So in the first quarter, I read Vanity Fair, Cranford, and David Copperfield. And in the second quarter, I read The Warden and Silas Marner. So definitely checked off for that. Then I wanted to read at least one non-Victorian classic. So for the first quarter, I read Fathers and Sons by Ivan Turgenev and Titus Andronicus by William Shakespeare. And then in the second quarter, I read Gone with the Wind, Book of the City of Ladies, Julius Caesar, and Winnie the Pooh. My third category was at least one large book, so meaning over 600 pages, I think is what I originally said. And the first quarter, I read Vanity Fair and David Copperfield. And the second quarter, I read Gone with the Wind and The Mirror and the Light. I was able to finish. Then I wanted to read at least one Shakespeare each quarter, so I read Titus Andronicus for the first quarter and Julius Caesar for the second quarter. Next, I wanted to read at least one nonfiction this year, and the first quarter I read John Adams, and in the second quarter I read If Walls Could Talk by Lucy Worsley. And then my final grouping was rereads, rereading at least one book each quarter. The first quarter I did read Pride and Prejudice and Mansfield Park, which were both rereads. The second quarter I reread Emma, and then I also started Tess. I'm almost done with that, but I did start Tess in the second quarter. So, and then already for the third quarter I've started a nonfiction. Like I said, I'm almost done with Tess. I've also reread Persuasion already, so definitely on my way there. I'm not sure how I'm going to fit in the rest of the categories quite yet for the third quarter. Obviously The Moonstone is a Victorian work, and I guess Persuasion is technically a non-Victorian classic if I want to count that. For the first two quarters I had a lot of read-alongs and readathons and things that really worked to help me with that. And the third quarter I don't have as much. The fourth quarter I have even less though, so that will be very interesting, but I feel pretty confident that I'll be able to do it. I just need to maybe think about it a little bit more for the third and fourth quarters. Anyway, that is it for my mid-year check-in. Let me know down below if you've read any of the things I've mentioned, as I would love to know your thoughts on them. Additionally, let me know what your favorite book that you've read this year is. I am always open to recommendations, and I'm also just very curious to hear how people's reading years are going and what's really standing out to them. So be sure to let me know that in the comments. Thank you again for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe if you would like to, and I will see you next time. Bye!